Prince Harry has finally decided to leave Birmingham Palace and continue his life elsewhere far away from Prince William and King Charles drama. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. The sun had barely risen over Birmingham Palace when the first murmurs began to ripple through its corridors. A sense of unease hung in the air, one that the palace staff could feel but not name. The great halls, once filled with routine and regal calm, now carried attention that no one dared to address aloud. Servants moved carefully, their eyes avoiding contact with one another, as though afraid that even their glances might betray awareness of the storm brewing behind closed doors. And in the midst of it all, Prince Harry walked those same halls with the quiet resolve of a man growing tired of pretending. It had started long before that morning, long before the headlines, the accusations, the fractured statements disguised as family correspondence. The roots of it all stretched deep back to the moment he first realized that home could also feel like a cage. Returning to the UK had been meant as a chance to reconcile, to rebuild bridges broken by years of mistrust and distance. But as days turned into weeks, Harry began to sense that something had shifted permanently within the walls of the monarchy. It wasn't just the coolness in conversations or the polite distance during meals. It was the invisible wall between what he felt and what he was allowed to express. Birmingham Palace, with its immaculate order and ceremonial perfection, had become a world of silent performances. Every movement, every phrase, every nod of the head seemed to belong to an unwritten script that Harry no longer wanted to follow. He could feel eyes on him even when no one was there. The whispers from aides, the reports sent up the chain, the glances exchanged between courtiers. Whenever his name was mentioned, it all created a constant hum of suspicion that never ceased. He had once found comfort in these walls, surrounded by the legacy of his family. Now they felt suffocating, like reminders of expectations that no longer aligned with his truth. Even the air inside the palace seemed different. It carried the weight of history and hierarchy of duty layered upon duty, until it became impossible to separate identity from obligation. Every corridor, every portrait, every ceremonial clock ticked to the rhythm of control. Harry often found himself stopping before certain paintings, portraits of past monarchs whose lives had been shaped by the same forces now pushing against him. He wondered whether any of them had ever felt the same yearning for freedom, or whether they had simply accepted their gilded confinement. The breaking point had not come suddenly. It crept in quietly over months of strained interactions and veiled remarks. It began with small things: a cancelled meeting with his father, a cold nod from his brother during a public appearance, an unreturned message. Each instance felt like a small cut, insignificant on its own, but unbearable when accumulated. Harry knew that the palace operated on appearances. What mattered was not how they felt, but how they were seen. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that his every step was being weighed against invisible scales of loyalty and defiance. There were moments when he tried to dismiss it, convincing himself that the tension was only in his head. But then came the meetings, the carefully staged gatherings where words meant one thing in private and another in the press. The palace machinery worked with silent efficiency, crafting narratives that protected the institution even at the cost of truth. Harry saw it unfold again and again, watching his stories were planted, shifted or erased depending on whose image needed saving. The realization cut deep within those walls. Truth was negotiable, but loyalty was not. And then there was the public pressure. Every appearance, every expression, every interaction was photographed, dissected and interpreted. The tabloids played their part like an orchestra of chaos, amplifying rumors until they became perceived reality. Harry often found himself reading headlines about conversations that had never taken place, feelings he never expressed, or motives that were completely fabricated. Over time, the noise outside the palace became indistinguishable from the silence within it. Both demanded that he remain silent, that he endure, that he play along. He began spending more time alone, retreating into parts of the palace seldom used. The library became a sanctuary, a place where he could lose himself among books that told stories of rebellion, of people who had walked away from what they were told they must be. Sometimes he would sit for hours in front of the same fireplace, staring into the flickering flames, wondering whether the cost of freedom was too high, or whether staying would cost him even more. He thought often about his mother. Diana's presence seemed to linger everywhere, her memory woven into the very fabric of his thoughts. He remembered her warmth, her laughter, her courage to speak out when silence was expected. She, too, had walked through those same halls feeling misunderstood, bound by expectations that didn't align with who she truly was. In the stillness of the palace, Harry sometimes imagined what she would have told him if she were still here. Perhaps she would have told him to trust his heart, to follow his own sense of purpose, even if the world turned against him. That thought gave him both strength and sorrow. The staff noticed changes in him. His usually calm demeanor became more withdrawn, his interactions brief and measured. He no longer lingered after official meetings, no longer engaged in small talk during family gatherings. At times, even his laughter, once open and effortless, seemed forced, like an echo of something fading. Those closest to him could sense it. The prince who once carried lightness now moved as though burdened by invisible chains. The growing rift with Prince William made the atmosphere even heavier. They saw each other often, but spoke little. When they did exchange words, the conversations were short, cordial, and laced with restraint. It wasn't anger that defined their distance. It was disappointment. Each brother believed he was doing what was right. Yet, both felt betrayed in ways neither could fully explain. Harry longed to bridge the gap, but every attempt seemed to deepen it. There was always a new misunderstanding, a new leak to the press, a new reason for mistrust. And through it all, the palace machinery kept turning, feeding off division as though unity were a threat. Even King Charles, though outwardly calm, seemed more distant than ever. His responsibilities as monarch left little room for emotion. When he did speak to Harry, it was often about duties, schedules, and representation, not about how he was coping or what he needed. The human warmth between father and son had thinned, replaced by the cool precision of royal decorum. Harry often left those conversations feeling emptier than before, haunted by the realization that love in the royal family was often expressed through silence rather than words. The palace at night was the loneliest place on earth. The grand chandeliers dimmed, the guards changed shifts, and the echo of Harry's footsteps followed him through the empty halls. He sometimes paused outside the old family rooms, remembering laughter that no longer filled those spaces. Once those halls had been alive with warmth, his mother's voice, his brother's jokes, the rare moments of togetherness. Now they felt hollow, the air heavy with what had been lost. It was in those quiet hours that the thought of leaving first began to take shape, not as rebellion, but as relief. Yet even then, he wasn't sure if he could go through with it. Leaving meant more than stepping away from the crown. It meant walking away from his past, from the very definition of who he had been raised to be. He struggled with guilt, wondering if his departure would be seen as betrayal. Would they understand? Would they see it as selfishness or as self-preservation? Those questions haunted him, especially during family appearances when the cameras captured the perfect image of unity. Only he knew how fragile it truly was. The breaking moment came during an early morning meeting about upcoming royal engagements. Aides spoke around him rather than to him, discussing where he should appear, how he should act, and what he should say. He sat there silent, watching his life being managed like a schedule rather than lived as a choice. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a quiet finality. He told them he would no longer participate in events that felt performative or disingenuous. The room fell silent. The statement was small, almost unnoticeable, but it marked the beginning of the end. In the days that followed, the palace began to shift around him. Invitations became fewer, his presence less requested. Whispers of disobedience spread. Yet Harry felt something unexpected. Calm, the fear that had once kept him compliant was dissolving, replaced by a growing clarity. He no longer needed to prove himself within those walls. He no longer sought approval from a system that had stopped seeing him as a person. As the tension thickened, he began preparing quietly, sorting through personal belongings, writing letters, making arrangements for a life beyond the palace. He moved through the halls like a ghost, unnoticed, yet fully aware that every step was taking him closer to freedom. And though uncertainty lay ahead, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose that was his alone. The shadows in the palace grew longer each evening, a silent reflection of what was happening within him. The decision to leave wasn't sudden or impulsive. It was the inevitable end to a long journey of realization. For the first time, Harry saw the truth with clarity. The palace wasn't just a home. It was a stage, and he was done performing. When the moment finally came to leave, it wasn't marked by grand farewells or dramatic declarations. It was quiet, almost invisible, just a man walking out of a place that had once defined him, carrying with him the weight of memories and the hope of peace. The corridors that had once echoed with his childhood laughter now held only silence as he walked away. And somewhere deep within the palace, as the doors closed behind him, history shifted ever so slightly. For the first time in generations, a prince had chosen freedom over tradition, not out of defiance, but out of the simple human need to be whole again. The transformation within the royal family had been gradual but unmistakable. Over the past few years, Prince William's influence had grown steadily, not only in public perception, but also behind the palace walls. He had become the symbol of continuity, the heir whose composure reassured the establishment that the monarchy would survive any storm. His words carried weight, his approval opened doors, and his silence could close them just as quickly. To the world, he was the future king, stepping confidently into his destiny. To his brother, he was becoming someone Harry barely recognized. William had always been the steady one, the responsible older brother, the one who played by the rules while Harry learned to question them. They had been close once, bound not only by blood but by shared pain, by the unspoken bond of two boys who had lost their mother too soon. Diana's death had made them inseparable in their grief, united in their vow to carry her memory with dignity. But as adulthood came and royal duties divided them, that bond began to strain under the weight of expectation and misunderstanding. The palace's inner circle began to shift its focus toward William as Charles took on the immense pressures of kingship. Advisors who once offered guidance to both brothers now devoted their energy almost entirely to the Prince of Wales. Meetings that had once included Harry now proceeded without him. His name was no longer mentioned in discussions about the future of the crown. There was an unspoken consensus that William represented stability while Harry represented disruption, a narrative that suited the institution perfectly. Harry could see it unfolding, but there was little he could do. The more he tried to voice his ideas, the more they were brushed aside. Every suggestion he made was met with polite nods, but no follow-up, as though his role was to listen, not to lead. When he attended royal briefings, he often found himself sidelined. His words met with silence, while William's every thought was treated like strategy. It wasn't envy that ate at him. It was the realization that his worth within the family had become conditional. William, for his part, seemed aware of the growing gap, but did little to bridge it. Whether it was deliberate or simply the natural result of P's pull, Harry couldn't tell. The brother who had once laughed with him, confided in him and defended him from scrutiny, was now a man consumed by duty. Conversations that had once flowed effortlessly were now marked by caution. Every word felt weighed. Every glance filtered through the invisible lens of image management. Harry longed for the brother who spoke freely, not the prince who measured every breath. The media's role in widening their divide couldn't be ignored. Headlines painted William as the disciplined heir, the stabilizing force of the monarchy, while Harry was cast as the emotional one, the rebel, the outlier, the unpredictable prince. The narrative was irresistible for the press. Two brothers shaped by tragedy, now standing on opposite sides of the royal machine. Each new article chipped away at their bond, turning private tensions into public spectacle. At first, Harry thought the differences could be repaired with honesty. He reached out to William several times, hoping for a genuine conversation, but the responses were always diplomatic. There were polite reassurances, vague promises to talk soon, and then silence. When they did meet, their exchanges were brief and formal, surrounded by advisors who seemed intent on keeping their interactions within safe boundaries. The warmth that once defined their relationship had cooled into formality. There were moments, though, when the old brotherhood flickered through short, fragile glimpses of what had been. During one official event, Harry caught William's eye, and for a brief second saw the familiar expression of exhaustion and recognition. It reminded him that behind the crown and cameras, William was still human, still burdened by expectations he had never chosen. But before either could say a word, the moment was gone, swallowed by the duties that demanded their separation. As William's power grew, so did his control over the narrative surrounding the royal family. Decisions about public engagements, charity focuses, and even family statements began to pass through him. The Curters adjusted accordingly, aligning themselves with the future king's vision. Those loyal to Harry found themselves quietly reassigned or marginalized. It was subtle but effective. Harry noticed the changes immediately, the absence of familiar faces, the new tone in palace communications, the careful exclusion of his perspective in family planning. It became clear that the royal institution had chosen its direction, and he was no longer part of it. Harry's frustration deepened when he realized how even private matters were being managed for optics. There were briefings before family dinners, reminders about posture, tone, and topics to avoid. He was no longer just speaking to his family. He was speaking to representatives of the crown. Every interaction felt rehearsed. When William spoke, others listened with reverence. When Harry spoke, they nodded with restraint. The imbalance was obvious and painful. William's demeanor toward Harry had changed as well. There was no overt hostility, but there was distance, measured, deliberate distance. It was as though he had accepted that his brother's worldview no longer aligned with the institution's mission. In private moments, Harry sensed that William saw his independence as a threat to royal unity, a narrative the palace was eager to reinforce. But to Harry, the greater threat wasn't individuality, it was conformity. During one particularly tense encounter, their differences erupted into open disagreement. It was a meeting about the family's approach to modernizing public appearances. Harry suggested initiatives focused on mental health and transparency, ideas he believed could humanize the monarchy. William listened in silence, then calmly replied that such openness could blur the lines between royal responsibility and personal vulnerability. The words stung not because of their meaning, but because of who said them. Harry realized then that William wasn't just protecting the institution, he was becoming it. That moment crystallized everything Harry had been feeling. The monarchy, in its relentless pursuit of control and image, had turned his brother into a guardian of tradition rather than a partner in truth. William had become the very thing their mother had once warned them about. A prisoner of the crown's expectations, trapped behind a mask of perfection. And though Harry pied him, he also resented the way that transformation had cost them their brotherhood. Outside the palace, The world saw only what they were meant to see: smiling photographs, brief gestures of unity, carefully choreographed appearances that suggested reconciliation. But behind the flash of cameras there was only cold distance. The brothers no longer spoke about real things, no more late-night confessions, no more laughter over shared memories. Even when standing side by side, they felt like strangers bound by duty rather than blood. As William's influence solidified, Harry began to feel the walls close in. Every decision he made seemed to be interpreted as defiance. Every attempt to assert independence was twisted into rebellion. Advisors cautioned him to be more aligned with palace priorities. What they really meant was obedient. He began to see that the institution had no room for individuality, only hierarchy. William had learned to thrive within that system. Harry had not and never would. It was during those final months at Birmingham Palace that Harry came to understand the depth of his isolation. He wasn't just the spare anymore. He was the outsider within his own family. Every choice, every opinion, every word he spoke was filtered through suspicion. It became clear that the more William's star rose, the more Harry was expected to dim his own. And for a man who valued authenticity above appearance, that was something he could no longer accept. He thought often about how things might have been different. If their mother had lived, would she have bridged the growing chasm between her sons? Would she have reminded them that the crown was not meant to divide them? Those questions lingered unanswered in the quiet of the nights when he couldn't sleep. He missed the brother who had once stood beside him during their darkest days, not the public figure who now stood before him in tailored silence. The rise of William marked not only a shift in the monarchy's power, but also a turning point in Harry's heart. Watching his brother ascend further into the machine they once questioned together filled him with conflicting emotions, pride, sorrow, and an ache he couldn't name. He knew that William carried enormous responsibility, but he also knew that in the process they had lost something irreplaceable, the unguarded honesty that had once made them more than just princes. By the time the public began to notice the tension between them, the damage was already done. The brothers who had once walked side by side behind their mother's coffin were now separated by duty, pride, and the weight of expectation. For Harry, the realization was devastating. His brother's rise symbolized everything he could no longer endure, the sacrifice of self for the preservation of image. And as William's authority grew stronger, Harry's resolve to leave grew unshakable. In the stillness of his room one night, Harry wrote a single line in his notebook, something he hadn't shared with anyone. "Power changes everything," he wrote. Even love. It was a simple truth, but one that carried the full weight of his experience. The palace had crowned William with power, and in doing so it had taken from them the very